If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From Data Rails, this is FP&A Today.
Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive with Marcos Bento and David Suter from Wasabi Technologies. In part 1, we explored how their FP&A and BI teams work together to build trust, move fast, and create a high-functioning data partnership. In this episode, we'll shift gears into execution, how they define and govern metrics, manage data access, and use analytics to drive performance across Wasabi's multi-channel business. Let's get back into it. Guys, welcome back.
Excellent. Thank you.
I want to lead off actually and talk about skills and mindset. And we talked about this a bit in talking about the partnership between you guys in episode 1, but what makes someone successful in BI today? Marcos, starting with you, and then on the FP&A side, what do FP&A professionals need to understand about data work? So Marcos, we'll start with you and then move over to Dave from there.
Table stakes, you need to understand how to do some programming. In the case for Wasabi, people are either writing SQL or Python code day in and day out. But more important than that, it's the context and the outcome of this data. They should not be writing 1,000 rows of SQL code just because they were asked to do an analysis. They need to understand they need to be able to translate code into actual English and to help everyone translate the data into actionable items. The work doesn't stop when their dashboard is created, right? It is now that you have the dashboard, how can you help everyone to interpret, and how can you help everyone in their teams to actually change their processes, close more deals, make our customers even happier than they are today? That's what truly sets someone apart from the BI crowd.
Actually, I'm going to stay with you for a second, and then Dave, I'm going to go with a 2-part question for you as well. From your perspective, we know FP&A people don't all need to be able to write code now, or to be machine learning engineers or whatever the case is. But from your perspective, what do FP&A professionals need to understand about data work and BI and the work that you guys are doing?
They need to translate a business request in English in a way that the BI folks can translate that into code.
Love it.
That's where the magic happens. Last week, I think that Dave was in a call with the analyst and he was showing the SQL, and Dave was, I may not understand this, but here's what I need. And the analyst could translate, understand, move whatever the English translation to code is. And that's where it gets very exciting and interesting.
Love it. So I guess, Dave, I'll flip it for you. What about the other way around? Is there something that BI teams need to know about FP&A that is maybe different than their other customers? Or, I mean, honestly, to my mind, FP&A, we're like the OG BI people. We were doing BI before it had a name. So
that's right.
From your perspective, what do you think?
I guess I would reiterate what Marcos said. It's the communication. It's translating business requirements to technical input into a model, and then from their perspective, being able to explain it. Hey, we were looking at all this. We found these exceptions. This is the order of magnitude. Probably immaterial or not. And being able to communicate and talk about those things we found. That's just invaluable. That's the most important skill set.
Yeah. You hit on something that I want to ask both of you this. How important is storytelling to FP&A? Because we hear about it all the time. Now, it used to just be, I don't know, you work in finance and you do the flux analysis and you do some forecasting and all that. But now it's business partnering, it's storytelling and all the other parts of it. But when there's more time, even if it's an automation in Excel, when reports are getting built faster, the value is coming from those insights and that narrative. So on your team, David, are there certain people who are the better storytellers, or is it you're getting the inputs from the team, and you're the one who's crafting the story. How does storytelling work into FP&A at Wasabi?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's about, how you communicate complex information to business owners of various levels of understanding. We deal with people who are highly technical, who want to know every little detail. And then, the very next hour, we're on with executives who want things at a very high level. So you have to storytell across very wide audience. We talk about skill sets that people need. I think one of the things that we need in FP&A is the ability to connect the dots. Oh, I heard in this other call this thing, and how does that relate to what we're trying to do in X, Y, and Z? Nobody's ever drawing that line for you. You've got to hear something on a company-wide call that it might affect your business, or just the headlines. Oh, there's a new tariff regime coming. Okay, well, how's that going to affect our ability to purchase hardware and things like that? You're always trying to connect the dots and make it more relatable and tell that story to folks.
Great. What about from a BI standpoint, Marcos?
Everyone needs to be storytellers, Glenn. To what we spoke earlier in the first episode, there is just so much data out there, and people may not be the best in understanding and interpreting the data. So when you're showing a report with three different charts and 10 different numbers, it is, what does that mean? How can you use that number to influence and help each one of the teams and each one of the users of that information? You can be the best coder, but if you cannot say, hey, what does this new report mean? If you cannot tell an executive or someone in sales what's the purpose and the use of net retention, your work becomes a lot harder, because now you cannot merge and you cannot be on their foot. You cannot be on the foot of your customers to understand, okay, now that I have net retention, what do I do with this measure? If I don't understand, it's going to be meaningless. And if this is such an important metric for our executive team, for the board, and for our investors, now it's part of our work to explain this for everyone.
My regular listeners are going to be rolling their eyes right now, but because I use this quote a lot, but I think around storytelling and adding that value, it is, and when you mention just how much data is out there and being able to sift through that and find the signal through the noise. But there's a quote by Clifford Stoll that I just use all the time, because to me, it talks about the levels of value that we're going to bring as automation kind of creeps up. But it's also just the function of both FP&A and BI. But the quote is, data is not information. Information is not knowledge. Knowledge is not understanding, and understanding is not wisdom. So I think about, you're getting the deluge of all the billboards, and you're identifying, okay, these are the ones you need to pay attention to. And even beyond that, finding those trends, finding those key pieces of information, that's where we're really starting to add the value. And I think that's a shared concept for both FP&A and BI. So you mentioned net retention, and that is something that we talked about before the show. So I think it was something like working through 130 plus iterations of the net retention metric. I would love to hear from both of you, but who wants to start kind of telling us that story, what you learned about metric development, collaboration, data trust, how that must have been to go through so many iterations? And I know you'll both comment, but who wants to kick us off there?
Let me hear from my customer first.
Oh, it's a messy thing. Lots of data and lots of change happening all the time. Net retention can be a funny metric to pin down. I worked at a prior company where we had a freemium model, and then customers would start to pay a little bit, but just such little immaterial dollars that if you looked at like customer retention, they would throw the numbers way off. And we came to the point of, let's just call those like a paid trial and just exclude them entirely to get to our net retention numbers. So there's all these iterations of things like that to ultimately get to something that's usable. And to the storytelling part, it's like, okay, well, here's why we're going to exclude this whole cohort of users. It's just not relevant to what we're trying to do as a business. So yeah, it's a messy thing with kind of the large influx data set like we have. But I think we finally got our arms around it in a way that is, understandable, consistent, predictable, in a way that like makes sense. It feels right. But it's a tough process. A lot of times, it feels like you one step back to take two steps forward, constantly iterating on draft after draft after draft. And I get frustrated. I'm sure the BI team gets frustrated, but we got there in the end, I think.
I'm very happy to hear about that, Glenn. So the journey to create this was very interesting. And if you want me, I can just go a little bit deeper. In the beginning, it was a totally manual process from one analyst that had the software. It was on his laptop and his laptop only because it was a super expensive tool. And he was spending literally 2 full days working through the data, making sure that every filter is working properly and the data is clean enough that he can proper analyze and create and change all the foundations of what do we define as a customer, to what Dave just said. What were our billing methods? What's the revenue? What's the ARR? What's the storage of each one of our customers? It literally took him 2 full days to get this data through. And to Dave's point, we may not, back in 4 years ago, there were plenty of opportunities to make this more automated. And to what Dave said, it took us more than what he needed the data to be ready for. But when we moved the data from our on-prem and different sources into the data lake, which is, by the way, a shameless plug, you can actually use Wasabi as a storage provider for your Snowflake data. It's cheaper, it's as performant as any of the other hyperscalers. Now that we have data into our Wasabi bucket, we can slice and dice this in however we want. And it goes to Dave's definition. We now have an agreed upon definition of what net retention is. Now it automatically reports and translates the data every month. So from a 2 full day process, it's now automated in, 15 minutes every 2 a.m. once a month.
Wow.
And not only that, it's so much better. It's so much more robust. We can dive into what's behind the numbers and understand it. I mean, there's real meat behind it. We are light years from where we started a few years ago.
That's incredible. So as you're going through and defining this with all the data and all the parts out there, did it feel like legislation or a courtroom battle or whatever, where you're trying to decide what to use and who has what inputs? And how was the collaboration on just defining what goes into this metric, what's excluded, and how we build that and getting to something that everybody at your level and up would understand and agree on?
Dave, do you want to take?
Yeah, I worked for a large public company and at one point was tasked with find out how many new customers we got this quarter, this year, whatever. And I quickly found out that we couldn't define new and we couldn't define customer. So
that sounds about right. Yeah.
Right. And so, it's messy and it's complicated. How do we eventually solve it? Well, you got to cast a wide net, get all the people into the tent, and you got to story tell to how, what is this number? What are we trying to get out of it? And why do we want to include that or exclude this? It's just trying to build consensus around why this matters with a pretty broad set of stakeholders. Making sure that everyone, whenever we talk about net retention, this is what we mean. It's a lot of repetition.
From your side, Marcos?
I agree. I cannot add anything more than that.
Yeah. FP&A Today is brought to you by DataRails, the world's #1 FP&A solution. DataRails is the artificial intelligence-powered financial planning and analysis platform built for Excel users. That's right, you can stay in Excel. But instead of facing hell for every budget, month-end close, or forecast, you can enjoy a paradise of data consolidation, advanced visualization, reporting, and AI capabilities. Plus, game-changing insights giving you instant answers and your story created in seconds. Find out why more than 1,000 finance teams use DataRails to uncover their company's real story. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Learn more at datarails.com. So another thing we talked about before the show was self-serve data marts. And I think David, you said earlier, and this is where I always lived. I never had the good fortune of having a team like Marcos and his team to help me. So it was basically, I wanted all the data and I wanted to define it. And not that I'm going to reinvent KPIs every quarter or whatever, but let me just pull it. I got burned a couple times with, as I had sort of hoovered up all the data in the company and owned it, coming up with this great idea of I didn't have much of a team and wouldn't it be cool if everybody could get their own data? So we went down the road of a self-serve data mart until I got crushed in a board meeting by someone who'd done their own research and pulled and pulled some different numbers to argue with the CFO in front of the board. So and that ever since then, it seems like a great dream, and I'd love to get there, but I cannot figure out to get there. So Marcos, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on self-service data, kind of what its promise is, what are the pitfalls? What do you think? Is that something you've deployed successfully, that you're doing on even a limited basis at Wasabi? What do you think?
We have some level of success in this and some failures that we learned over time, Glenn. We have like those 300 reports. Every person at Wasabi can log into our BI tool and have access to those reports. And we set up all the filters that a user can have on these data sets. So it's not freely a data mart that people can look at all the 400,000 columns that we have in our database. We give a couple of different types of reports with the exact view that we understand they will need. Again, if they need something different that it's not across these reports, then we build report 301 or 401. But we always try to balance the ability of giving more versus less. Otherwise, everyone can create from the same data set, they can reach completely different results. And that's not the objective of a data mart.
Yeah, I think the challenge is people, you don't know what you don't know. And the context and the nuance of why we report something the way we do is really important. So I completely agree with Marcos's approach. Limited, controlled information in the hands of users is good. Unlimited information in the hands of everybody.
Yeah.
There's some downside to that.
Yeah. So there's the reports that come out of BI, the reports that come out of FP&A, and I'm sure different departments and divisions and regions have their own reports. But how does ownership work for reporting of numbers there? Like who owns what when it comes to churn, CAC, ARR, net new logos, whatever's being reported? Is BI the ultimate reporting authority, or does it go through finance? How does that work?
I mean, historically, I think a lot of that has been owned by FP&A, and I have reluctantly given up some of that reporting to Marcos and team. But I think a lot of the metrics you just rattled off there come from Marcos's team.
Gotcha. Is that because they've built automations and it's kind of part of those standard reports and it's just set it and forget it? It's defined, it's out there, it's consistent, and it's automated?
Partly yes, Glenn. And part of how we came up with every Monday morning, we have the set of reports that we need to submit to the exec team. That was 5 years ago from the PI team. That was just a process of continuous iterations of this. But Glenn, what's important about this is we are not on an island, right? It's not the ivory tower. It's not that, we are reporting on net retention that Dave doesn't influence or doesn't have a view on this. We can only be successful if we work together. If I'm working by my own, it goes back to what we spoke. It can never be successful if it's working by your own.
Makes sense. Still, you have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to data. And I think about just how complex the data, but also your go-to-market, direct channel, B2B, B2C. How do you make sure that metrics reflect that complexity without, it gets so deep so fast. So it seems like there would be a potential to overwhelm people with that. And this goes to the storytelling, even if it's just visualization of the storytelling of just so much information. Like how do you approach that? And maybe start on the BI side, and then Dave on the FP&A side. It's not as much data underneath, but there's still all the channels and all the reporting and different ways that people want to slice and dice it.
So, at the most fundamental way to think about our business, Glenn, we sell cloud storage. We sell through a couple different billing methods and a couple different go to market strategies. So, this becomes a 4x4 matrix. So, you have those two billing methods and those two go to market strategies. If you want to drill this down per region, and then for each region we have sub regions, then you can also get this per sales rep. So you can see these 4 rows becoming 50 rows very soon, very fast. So it depends on the audience and the objective of the report. If it is for the executive team, it will go for only the most foundational data sources. If we need to analyze commissions, then we group by or we analyze on all the individual roles that we need for reporting purposes.
Yeah, you mentioned like direct channel, B2B, B2C, it's worse than that. Like Marco said, there's different pricing schemes. I think we have something like 6 orders of magnitude between smallest and largest customers. So we have a really long tail. I mean, it's a lot. In the past, I think we have gotten in trouble trying to boil the ocean, trying to handle all these edge cases and exemptions and this and that, and just, again, try to boil the ocean and ended up making no progress. So back to my earlier point of trying to, avoid that metrics bloat. What are the high level, simple 3 to 5 metrics we can track? What we ended up doing was really, I think, taking things up to a much higher level. Now, it doesn't account for the nuance and the timing and the this or the that, but we can come up with metrics that are digestible, easy to understand, directionally correct, and actionable. Like, that's better than trying to come up with something down to the penny that nobody can understand.
Yeah, and the crazy thing with that, and it just keeps feel like peeling back layers of an onion, or if you give a pig a pancake, that kind of thing. But so not every metric needs to be revolutionary, but they need to be understood. So you give this high level, but then it just always starts begging the question all the way down. So how do you ensure, okay, we've rolled it up, here's your top level, but you also need to understand how that's built without getting into the complexity of the 130 iterations to build a number. But so how do you ensure that the stakeholders really understand the story behind that number?
I think it's a little bit of what we talked about before. It's storytelling, it's communication, it's reiterating. Repetition is good. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And yeah, it is knowing your audience. It is making it digestible and understandable. You come to an executive meeting with it's like, by the time you have to explain the joke, you've lost, right?
Right.
If you're, trying to explain a metric to an executive team, you've lost.
Yep. Great point there. 100%. And I guess with that, when you guys changed from the 2-day process on someone's computer, you did have to change the calculation and the rules around that metric. How difficult is that? Because I feel like probably there was a shift in reporting one quarter to the next when you changed to the new metric. Is that, that's just kind of part of it. And you're saying, hey, we're getting a better number for you quicker and all that. But is that, how complicated is it when you do come in, especially if you come in, I think, Dave, you came in and stood up FP&A there, right? So you're probably have had to work on a lot of metrics that maybe change the definition and go through the data dictionary and work through that. Was that difficult? Because I know you guys aren't public, but you have the pressure of investors and management. Anytime the way that reporting goes changes, that's an issue.
Sure. Yeah. To be clear, I didn't stand up FP&A. That was established here before me. But yeah, I definitely inherited some things that weren't great. Yeah, we have the benefit of not being public, and so we can go back and restate metrics. Yeah, a change in definition is you can't just have a stair-step change without explaining it. So yeah, you go back and restate prior periods. It was A, now it's B, and this is what that trend looks like over time. Yeah, and try to make it simple and digestible, and everybody gets it.
Yeah.
And Glenn, it was also part of a lot of communication. It was setting expectations that, hey, change is coming to net retention. It may change how the numbers will come, and we will be able to explain why those changes are happening. And because we were private, we had all the buy-in from the executive team. I think it was important how the transition went.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. One metric in particular we talked about before the show was cost per dollar of new ARR. Tell me about how you landed on that and what that helps you uncover or change.
Yeah, always looking for ROI metrics. It can be a challenge, particularly with like R&D, for example. How do you measure the return on R&D? But for sales and marketing, it was really because of that complex go-to-market approach. Some sales are direct, some are through a channel. How are we allocating those dollars across those two different channels? It can be messy, and again, you got a little caught up trying to boil the ocean on some of these things, but ultimately, you know, came up with cost per dollar of net new ARR. It's really simple. It's literally sales and marketing expense divided by incremental ARR. And it handled, it can be a crude measure and maybe a little, at times imperfect, because marketing dollars you spend today might pay off, 1 or 2 quarters in the future. So it's not a one-to-one. But again, it is directionally correct. If you track it over time, it will hold true. It is also something that you can get a proxy for how your competitors are doing, looking at publicly available information. It's not perfect, but you can look at someone's Q4 revenue times 4. That's a proxy for their ARR. You can look at their sales and marketing and look at how you compare against the competition. So yeah, it was a great way to validate whether we are, this is again looking for a third data point. It was an ability, it was a way for us to be able to look at ourselves and our competitors in an even playing field to say, this is how we stack up. And it was it was great. We created this little bubble chart. The size of the bubble was the amount of revenue of the customer, and we plotted revenue growth against cost of net new ARR. And it's a great view. It's a great comparison of how you're performing, how your competitors are performing, and looks at your return on sales and marketing dollars.
That is great. When you can find something like that you can actually roughly benchmark, it's so much more helpful too. So I love that. Yeah. All right. Well, I feel like we're getting close already to running out of time again. I got a bunch more questions, so I'm gonna pick and choose to be sure we land this thing without going over. Let's talk about how your teams are structured. So let's start, Dave, with you on your full team, and maybe walk us through size and what the roles and skill sets are for your team members.
Sure. Right now, we're 4 of us, including myself. So we are lean and mean. For years, there was just 3 of us, and it was myself and 2 analysts under me. They were business partners to the rest of the organization. One focused on a lot of the technical teams, the data center operations, customer support. The other on sales and marketing and G&A. We recently added another person to help support one of those guys so that we can get him up a little bit in his thinking and his work. So it's myself, 3 guys under me. I like being a little bit on the lean side. You stay busy, you get your hands into lots of different projects. You got to always balance the demand on your time versus the resources you got. But it's a great group, works well together, easy to work with, really fun team to work with.
Yeah. And are they all, were you hiring pretty much the same skill set for each, or do you have one role that maybe needs to be a little better at visualization or whatever? What's the breakdown kind of in the difference in capabilities?
Mostly the same, I think. But yeah, if we could hire a guy with some sales and marketing experience to handle that sort of business partnership, that's even better. Because that is very different than the highly technical, detailed oriented technical folks. But broadly speaking, you're looking for problem solvers, obviously the table stakes of, some accounting, you can do some Excel modeling, but, really looking for that problem solving skill set, that pragmatic approach to issues, somebody who can communicate. I always kind of joke, you got to be a little bit of a chameleon because you're talking to all different people across all these functions. And, from an entry-level person to an executive, you got to be able to talk to people in the way that they want to talk to you with. So you got to be a little bit of a chameleon there. But I think the people that I'm trying to hire, I think are pretty interchangeable in that we can, you wear a lot of hats, you can do a lot of different roles. The core problem solving skill set is what I'm probably most looking for.
Yeah, it sounds like that you're weighted, and I think it's always tough to try to figure out that balance. But I'm trying to remember a business case study from a million years ago, but I think it was Southwest. They would hire personalities more than skill sets because they could train, if you got the right person, you can train them for whatever. But like you said, Excel and being able to model and all that's table stakes. But would you say you weight those soft skills pretty high when you're interviewing and selecting?
Yeah, definitely. You can teach anybody an Excel formula, right? You can't teach them how to communicate or be easy to work with or to storytell, things like that.
Yeah.
Those are the soft skills that are, you can't teach that.
Well, and it's probably that, going back to the very first bit that we talked about, is the relationships between you guys and being able to work across departments for both of you across the company. That probably really paid off there, and having because there's a lot of people who are great engineers or great at Excel, but man, they're not someone you want to talk to. Just stick them in a back corner.
That's right. And with a small team, we don't have the luxury of having those guys.
Yeah. How about Marcos on the BI side?
So we are 5. So one data scientist, one data analyst, one data engineer, and then one intern. While each one has their primary hat, they're always using everyone's hat. So you may be working in a project doing the pipelines, creating the pipelines to ingest new data. We just ingested our ERP data into the data lake earlier this year. Now, that same person, now it's tasked to create the reports for that data set. It's not, the person has to have end-to-end skills, understand, be flexible, also have the humility of understanding that sometimes you don't know everything, but you have a core group of team and a great organization that can teach you and guide you to whatever problems you have. Our hiring process, we try to get a mix of soft skills and hard skills. We give takeaway exercises. We want to understand if people know how to, with this data set, please calculate and give the insights on net retention. If you don't know net retention, I expect you to at least go to your search engine and then look at this and say, okay, what the heck is net retention rate? How would a software as a services company analyze this? What me as a data analyst or as a data person can use this data to provide the insights. And we will use that take home exercise for some follow-up interviews. So now we have data, obviously mass data, anonymized data, not Wasabi related, but at least we know and we can understand how the day-to-day will be.
I think I was getting to this earlier about domain expertise, and obviously in finance, it's become a much bigger deal. But to Dave's point, you can train people, and or to your point about Google it, figure it out. When you're hiring, I feel like in data science and in data engineering and in BI, there's the supply and demand. There's such high demand right now. You probably can't pull out exactly, you can't write the job description and then just reach into the ether and pull that exact person. But how much are you waiting, coming from SaaS or coming straight from school, industry experience and in the type of work? Or is it more they just need to really get data and have the right approach to it?
Great question, Glenn. So it's interesting. When we were looking at our data analyst position, we sent the exact same data set for the people interviewing. And there was not 2 responses that were equal. So with the same data set, with the same question, hey, please provide me answer on churn and net retention. Every single person got different questions and answers. So I want to understand, during the take-home exercise, does this person ask me any emails, ask me for clarifying questions? I want to understand if they are asking me or if they are going to say, we give a week for the person to work. I want to see if the person sends me a clarifying question the night before the deadline, or if they are asking 2 days after they got the data. These are some of the very small tips that you get to understand how the person works, and is this a person that I want to work with.
we've come full circle and seen the way you guys work together, the type of work that you're doing. For companies that are trying to replicate what you guys have built, where should they start? And I don't know if we start, at the base data level or start upstream with FP&A or downstream rather with FP&A. But is it to be able to have this kind of insight? Do you start with tooling, process, org design, or something else? Like if you're trying to have the BI and FP&A team work together so well, is there anything that you can think of that's sort of the secret sauce? And I know we talked about people, and maybe it comes down to that, but there is also the whole process and everything else around it. So I don't know. I don't know if you both have an answer to that, but I'll throw it out and see who's got some ideas around that.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I think it's the classic people, process, and technology. Get the right people in the right role, give them the right tools, and then make sure they're executing against the right process. And of course, the hardest part of all that is recognizing when one of those things is not right and making a change. But where to start? I would say it's get the right people in the right roles, problem solvers, pragmatic approach to solutions, communicators. You get the right people in there, and like I said, you can teach them Excel, you can teach them BI, but you get the people who approach the problems the right way. That's worth more than somebody who knows how to write a Python code.
Yeah. So how about from your side, Marcos?
I would add that we also have a leadership team that allow us to learn and to improve our processes. We know what they are expecting from us. We hope that we blow their expectations every day. Sometimes we don't, but we are also willing to learn, adjust, and improve throughout the process. Some of these changes will take time. Then it becomes a matter of let's discuss, let's set expectations, let's understand how we can deliver what's being asked from us. And from that, we can improve. We have room for adjustments and innovation. And our CFO and the entire executive team is always looking for what's next and how else can we make or provide better data and provide to allow for better decisions.
And having leadership understand as you're building the airplane while it's flying, and having that patience and letting you guys work through this together, I could see how the cross departmental development for your employees goes up too. But I'm wondering, and this is always tough with as busy as you guys are, as lean as your teams are, how do you handle training of your employees? Is it kind of just everybody's learning on the go, or do you structure in any organized coaching or mentoring programs? How do you develop your teams?
It's a little bit of all the above. There's always a big benefit of hands-on learning, but you got to have coaching along the way. I definitely try to do that with my directs. And then when we have like somebody new start, what I also like is kind of the buddy system, because they're going to be willing to tell a peer. They're going to be more frank, I think, with a peer than they would be with a manager, right? That relationship is just inherently different. So it's a lot of coaching, learning, in the real world. And I always say it starts real slow and then all of a sudden it gets real fast because the training wheels kind of come off and you got to get something done. So it's a little bit of all the above. A lot of training, a lot of like hands-on doing actual work. And I think that buddy system is invaluable.
What about collaborative training between your two departments? Or maybe that's more happens just in the nature of working together. But have you guys considered or done any training where here's where FP&A can learn more about BI, or here's where BI can learn more about corporate finance? Or
That's actually a great question and probably a great suggestion for us to implement, Glenn. I'm sure that I can learn a lot from Dave and his team about knowing what they know about finance and what else can we do to provide to help them. We use Slack is probably what everyone communicates for fast and quick chats. We have a lot of Zoom calls where we are talking, discussing, but again, it's always driven by action. It is, okay, what are the next steps? How else? When's our next follow-up? When can we provide something for Dave and his team to see the data and the next data and the next? If it's not collaborative, iterative and fast, it's not working well enough.
All right, we're right at time. I'm going to go lightning round here. One more question. We ask everybody. I got to ask both of you. What is your favorite Excel function and why? Dave, we'll start with you.
X lookup.
Love it.
It is more versatile than VLOOKUP.
Yeah.
Not quite as powerful as index match, but it's got the built-in if error check, and it's the best.
Cool. Marcos?
I am a if person.
Yep.
I love to build those 300 if statements. It goes wild to catch every scenario. But I learned from Dave about XLOOKUP. I was a VLOOKUP person. Ever since I got this Slack from him, I never looked back at VLOOKUP.
Love it. So, guys, thank you so much. I think this is going to be a great 2-part episode. I really appreciate your time and insight. So thank you both for coming on.
Likewise. Thank you very much.